should bring back the crossword Sky on Phil on Sky. It's a good start. Let me start that again. No, leave it. They should bring back the crossword on Sky. Remember the old Boots and All crossword?
Well, they should bring back Boots and All. Whatever happened to magazine programmes?
And then he could go into Martin Kellner's crossword joke, but I don't think he can do that. I've got some props today, which people on the podcast can't see. I've got 2 books. King Wally, here it is, which I didn't realise Wakefield outbid Leeds for him.
Adrian McGrath.
So King Wally, that's there.
Leeds have got him signed. £1,000 a week Leeds are going to pay him, and Wakefield $1,300.
And also here, Gary Schofield's season diary, which says here in association with Phil Kaplan. Never heard of him. I was thinking,
whatever happens to those two?
I know we could do it like an audio podcast, a book reading of this. Seeing as it's copyright Phil Kaplan, I think I could have a word with him. But I went straight to Wakefield away, Stones Bit of Championship, 1992. Whilst in camp at the hotel, the Leeds contingent heard that the side had again gone down away from home, this time in the last minute of the rearranged league fixture at Bellevue. Spelt incorrectly, Phil. VIEW, what's going on there? Our reaction was that even without the 3 current internationals, but with Andy Gregory returning from his 6-week layoff, the team should have been strong enough to win, especially when we learnt they had surrendered a half-time 16-4 lead. Having gained such a commanding position, even though down to 12 men, they should have been able to close the game down and wait for Wakefield to make mistakes playing catch-up football. On this occasion, not for the first time in the season, it seemed to work in reverse, and we appeared to lose the plot and let them back in the game. Although we had not seen the match, there was a sense of disbelief about the result and the circumstances of the loss, the winning point having been scored with the last kick. He wasn't there, but he knew what happened.
How did he know what happened if he wasn't there?
I know. You'd have been there.
Drama?
Who would have known? Because that's obviously nearly 30 years ago. You would. I'm assuming you were in the press box there, and I was on the touchline. I was the ball boy. Going.
Fate conspired.
Yeah, and that was a long time ago. Rugby League is back, Phil, because the championship was on at the week. I've left my paper in the room, so I don't know who won, apart from Featherstone. But Rugby League's back, and everyone's happy. Everyone's excited. London seemed to have a good crowd down at Widnes, although they lost. Lee won. The Challenge Cup's been on. It seems to have been a good week. I mean, there's no Super League because that doesn't start till next week, but all the other stuff has been good.
I think the important thing has been the crowds. I think that has been encouraging. We got rightly a little disillusioned with people weren't coming back in the numbers that they hoped that they would when we had crowds again last year. But 2,000 at Barrow, that's a testament to the work that they put in making themselves a true relevance in the community. 1,800 at Batley and playing Halifax, that's got to be the result of the first round. I would have said that. Now, it's not a shock because Batley made the playoffs last year, but certainly over Halifax, in the first game of the season, I think that shows as we spoke to Craig Lingard last week that they are rightly considered a team that will be in and amongst those at the end of the season. 2,000 for Dewsbury and Bradford. Again, 2 clubs that know each other very well. Over 3 at Lee. As you say, the biggest crowd at London, I think since 2013.
Well, because they can fit them in the ground as well, which is good.
Well, encouraging again because it's the first game at Plough Lane, and people were saying, they'll have given away loads of tickets to Wimbledon fans. I hope they did, because I think they'll have enjoyed themselves and they'll go back again. And then there are over 3,000 again at York on a Monday night for the televised game with Featherstone. That's all really good. I think the Challenge Cup had a couple of really excellent games. I'd watched the Army and the Navy. Couldn't have asked for more drama going into Golden Point extra time and the Navy coming from behind and winning that, and whisper it quietly with our guest who's due to come on. But there was an upset, there was a shock, and hats off to Lock Lane who won at Oldham. Last we heard, Lock Lane I think was still in the pub celebrating. Good on them. That I absolutely should. But I think just having competitive rugby league back is what we've missed. The only slight blip on the horizon will be at West Wales, who admitted after their shellacking by Swinton that they'd had a crisis meeting in the week leading up to it, which they've all, put their shoulders to the wheel and said they want to continue, but that can't have been the ideal preparation. But no, it's just great to be talking about rugby. I really don't think we should be having league tables in newspapers or even the RFL putting them out after one round.
I called them out on that on Twitter, but on our account, not on my own, because I don't want to get banned, because you know what they're like. I think when West Wales come to Hunslet, I might have to take my boots because I might get a game which is not good. I mean, hopefully West Wales can find their feet, and no one wants to see anyone fail or lose by big scores week in, week out. So
no, and again, I think we mentioned with the guys at Swinton, and no doubt we'll talk to our guest about it. It's really difficult to plan to play in the Challenge Cup when you're a side that is actually trying to peak in 2 months' time when your league season starts, and it's the league season that will determine all of your income, all of your season ticket holders. Even if you'd have won this round of the Challenge Cup or maybe gone a little bit further, in some ways for clubs in League One, it's a distraction, and it's the same in football. We're not making excuses. It's just very hard to get your team to peak 2 months before you need them to properly run out on the field.
So the Challenge Cup draw's been made. Those games come up in a couple of weeks. Is it next weekend? I think it's next weekend.
Yes,
when the Super League's back. So that'll be exciting. Speaking of Featherstone at York, I haven't seen the coverage because I haven't got Premier, but I've seen the clips, and it doesn't matter what I think. Well, he does want to write my column, but that'll come when I've seen it. But amazingly, social media, people in rugby league, all positive. Someone asked me on Tuesday, who used to work within rugby league, how did it go? And I said, well, I haven't seen it, but everyone's been positive, and what people in rugby league are like. So amazing scenes. Everyone's happy. The viewing figures, 51,000 is the average, apparently, although we'll see the proper figures come through in a couple of weeks. And the key now is to maintain those numbers and grow them, because as we saw with Bulls Live, and that was free on Facebook, massive numbers for the York-Bradford game in the first one, then they went as the season went on. So, fingers crossed that no one wants to see anyone fail, so hopefully it's good. And, obviously they've got the best commentator in the business there. So it's all good.
I think the important thing is that the choice and selection of the first two games have been absolutely right. So to go to a modern, bespoke stadium in York, to have, three sides open, to have real atmosphere, that helps. To have two sides that have real aspirations to be in the mix, that's great. The Featherstone fans were loud and proud. I think both teams got something out of the game. Clearly, when you look at who wasn't playing for Featherstone, they're only going to get better. And York are rebuilding again this year after virtually swapping their entire squad. And it must have been galling for the York fans to see what Morgan Smith can do when he never actually donned the shirt for York last year because he got injured in pre-season, and that happens. But everybody spoke well, I thought. The summarisers were great. So the commentator, we'd like to take credit for seeing him learn his trick. No, he was already good before we knew it. I think the presentation was fresh in the sense that there were a couple of different people in there who made an impact. They did the right thing. The experts there were allowed to summarise. The presenters brought the best out of the experts. An absolutely win-win. The figures sound highly credible. It'll go up a notch next week when it's Featherstone and Lee, and most people are saying this is the road to promotion, and it's a very important stepping stone in that early in the season. There'll be a big crowd. There'll be a great atmosphere. It'll be probably a little bit more hostile than it was at York, but it'll be great television. There's a lot made about Brian McDermott's interview pre-match with Ross Fiddies on the touchline, who is relatively inexperienced in that role, but a real rugby league man. And Brian did what Brian does, but what he did was he gave us something newsworthy. It went round social media, it elevated that game to people saying, I don't know who this guy is, or, oh, that's typical Brian McDermott. I need to watch. I either want this team to win or I want them to lose, or you invested something in it because of what he said and the way he said it. And I think that's great. The more personalities we have in the game, the more talking points we have, the more we can disagree with the way that perhaps he made his point. Great, because we're all talking about it, and more power to him and Premier to get the audiences over the line. I think we've got two different projects going on at the moment. Premier is clearly aimed at those who know rugby league, and the more of us that we invest in that, the more chance we've got of putting some money into the championship and getting rights that'll go on longer than just 2 years. Channel 4, which we'll know a little bit more about early next week, different kettle of fish. We're going for the new audience, and I noticed that ITV had their first Premiership Rugby Union game this week, and the viewing figures on free to air nearly 1 million. It gives us something to aim at, because I think we've got a product that is as good as any. And if we can get the right people presenting it at the right time of the weekend, then we should be going for a different audience as well as the core. And that's going to be the challenge.
We shouldn't compare our number to their number, because there's a big difference between being on ITV and being on Channel 4, unless we beat them, and then we can crow from the rooftops about it. But we're all friends now anyway, because, as Ben Folds 5 once sang, I want to be Kate, and she's the patron now. We got rid of Harry, binned him off. Now he's gone to America. Sod him. Don't like him anymore. The Duchess of Cambridge is the patron of the Rugby Football League.
I think, I don't. It's patronage. It's not. She's not actually going to. Well, I don't think she's going to be deciding. The fixture format for the next 3 years, or. Yeah, someone
say she might do a better. Someone says she might do a better job, but not me. I'm just saying that.
But what we have got is we've got a very high-profile royal who appeals to a young audience, who will be presenting our World Cups at the end of the year. And I think what the royal family, who have got issues of their own at the moment, will want to buy into is, if you like, that common touch. And we do that better than anybody. We're in our communities. She's going to have a Women's World Cup and a Wheelchair World Cup to extol. I'm sure she'll get involved when it's appropriate in the work that foundations are doing at a lot of clubs at the moment in getting into those difficult communities. She is an advocate of using sport to break down barriers, and I think that whatever you think of the royal family, if you are going to have patronage and it is going to spread the net wider, we could benefit quite significantly from it. The Hello magazine were tweeting a quote from Ralph Rimmer today. That ain't going to happen very often. So it will reach parts that rugby league cannot reach, and in that respect, if no other, it's a good signing.
Claire Balding's backed it. She's not been danger. I don't know why that is, but she knows. So, as I always say with these royal things, especially when they're involved in sport, clubs, send them some kits. I know that it's daft. It doesn't matter. Get Kate one on the back of a shirt and send it down there. Just have the photo of you sending it. She's not going to have a photo with it on, I don't think. But
I thought her passing technique was quite good in the video. Yeah. Hands in the right place on the ball, pass along the seams. She was almost exemplary.
They're all on there. James Simpson was on there. Jodie Cunningham. Some bloke, I didn't recognise the union fellow. I don't know who he was. But
well, we had more on than they did.
Yeah.
But it's not a competition. It's not a competition.
No. So that's good. And I think, is that all the news? I think that's all the news.
I think we've had some more pre-season friendlies, which people read too much into. The only thing you hope at this time of the year is that we don't have players injured who can't be there at the starting line. And I think there is a bit of concern at Hull that there's always a team that picks up a lot of injuries in pre-season and can never quite shake them off. And again, losing Jake Connor with a broken hand is a blow. They're down on troops, and I think. But no, it's Hull KR have had a run out. Huddersfield have had another run out. It's getting to that stage where now we genuinely want to see the thoroughbreds at the starting post and round one. Looking forward to it. Catalan and Toulouse played over the weekend. I'm not a fan of bigging up the first French derby in Super League and then playing it as a pre-season friendly. But over 3,500 people at the Stade Gilbert Brutus for a friendly again is encouraging. So yeah, let's look forward.
Yeah. So I mentioned Jonathan Ford's quotes in the League Express because some of those were bizarre, but you know, it's his choice. He wants to do what he wants. He can do what he wants. So that's it. If you listen to the podcast, not only will you get one interview, you'll get two. But if you're watching the program, you won't. You'll only get one, which is coming up in a moment. So here's the plan for the next couple of weeks. Next Thursday, we'll be live 6 o'clock, building up to the Super League season with a special guest who's always on. The week after, 15th of February, we're in Hunslet live. After that, we'll probably be back on Mondays forever. And let's face it, if you're moaning about, you know, the Duchess of Cambridge and, you know, you don't like the royal family, it could be worse. We could have asked Nadine Dorris to do it. So
apparently she's got something to do with culture.
Yogurts, I think. She don't like Channel 4, so she won't be there. But I mean, you'll be there next Saturday. You have to get behind whoever the presenter is waving the magazine or something.
Well, I don't think we're breaking any confidentiality here because we've written about it in the magazine, but I do believe Adam Hills will be the presenter.
Have you got any copies of this just lying around in the office? No.
I haven't seen that for years.
Cost me the grand total, £1, I think. But,
I think you've been done by about 78p there. The story behind that though was that after the Melbourne test, when Mr. G. Schofield was arguably the most high-profile player in the game, we knew there was a World Cup coming and that he was going to captain it. So England were going to win the World Cup. Yep. He was going to have a fantastic season with Leeds, having come back imbued with what had happened in Melbourne. We lost the World Cup and then he got injured and fell out with Doug Lawton. So, you know, the best laid plans.
You still wrote the book, though. That's the big thing. I'm reading it, and obviously I did a quick flick through of it today because it arrived while I was working. But because obviously I was a kid at the time and had no concept of anything. You can't believe that they played the Lancashire Cup, obviously the Yorkshire Cup final, Lancashire Cup final, on the weekend before the World Cup final. No one from Wakefield and Sheffield is playing in the World Cup final, to the shock of no one. But we're going to play in St Helens the week before the World Cup final, which could have ended in disaster. Obviously, it doesn't matter because no one got injured and no one we lost anyway. But rugby league, nothing changes. It's great. It's great. It's better. It's better these days. It's all right. All right. So, I mean, as I say at the start of this, last week arranged an interview with Oldham. As it turns out, didn't have the best of weekend in the Challenge Cup. They lose to Lot Lane. But I tell you what, fair play, Stuart Littler. He said, "No, come on," and here he is. So we'll catch you next week live. But here is the Oldham coach, Stuart Littler, talking to us about Oldham and Ireland because the World Cup is coming. I was very nervous about contacting our guest today, but fair play to him. Stuart Littler, coach of Oldham. He's come up to the plate. We've got to get it out of the way, Stuart. Sunday night. Not the best of nights for Oldham, but as you said to us before we came on air, it's done now. It's dusted. You're out of the cup. You can prepare for the League One season.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to go on record and say how great I thought Lot Lane was. And full credit to them. They put a rugged performance. I spoke to our boys in the week about them being a rugged side and having a good togetherness in the win at Thatterweath, which probably upset the form book a little bit when you're looking at amateur rugby league. But it was great on that day. We went over, myself and Brendan Sheridan went over and watched them. And we expected them to perform to the best. Obviously, flipping that on its head and giving them the credit that they deserve, we're a bit disappointed in our own performance as a whole, as a club. It's not on the players, and I sit at the top of the organisation, so I'm accountable for everybody on that performance side, and it lies with me at the end of the day. So I can only fully apologise to the fans for our performance on the evening. If you want to look for excuses, there's a few excuses out there, but I'm not one to look at that and look inwards and look at ourselves and what we can do better. had a bad couple of days, to be honest. My wife worried about me Sunday night and Monday morning. But then you start coming around, you review the game, see what we did well, because we did have patches where we did some good stuff. We did some good stuff defensively. We had a lot of trapping Loch Lane down in their own quarter, in their own half. But then we just didn't capitalise. We had 46% completion rate at half time. I asked the boys, I said, we need to control the ball better. We need to get to our kicks. And in the second half, we've completed 6 out of 18 sets. So we've had ample ball. We've had ample good ball down that end, and we've just not turned the screw. We've not built any pressure. And eventually, you know what I mean? The further we get into the game, I truly believe if we scored a try when we break it, we maybe win that game. But it didn't go in our favour, and that's nothing about the boy. Like I said, we're a team together, and that's gone. We move on. But I just think they got a leg up, and then you start to believe, don't you? And like I said to the boys in the week before, I said, I've been an amateur player and played a professional. It was years ago, but it's the biggest day of your life, isn't it? And you're playing a professional team, and once you get to a certain point in a game and you start looking at the clock, and then you get 2 tries in front, and then it's come on, it's on, and you know, and everybody feels special. You can see exactly what that meant to Loch Lane at the end, which obviously any other night I'd have probably been buzzing for them, you know, and everyone loves an underdog, don't they? And any other night I'd have been probably riding them home myself, but I thought we would come back, and I thought we could get back in the game, but it wasn't to be. And like I said, full credit, we wish Loch Lane all the best. I thought they were well structured on the night, great team, great coach, and I wish them all the best in the next round. From our point of view, loads of learning points, loads of opportunities for us to grow over the next few weeks. We've now got to probably arrange some games where we thought we may have had games anyway, and that becomes a bit difficult in itself with the Championship and Super League getting underway so soon. But hopefully we can get with some clubs who are already out the cup like ourselves. Potential of maybe a game with Rochdale with the Law Cup being talked about when Rochdale go out of the cup and stuff, and if that's doable before the season starts. So there's options there, and if not, there's pause sessions and stuff what we can run. But yeah, there's a lot of learning. What it has done is identify the magnitude of the job what we have got. I'm very happy before the game with the progress we've made as a club and where we've come from, because probably started with nothing, to be fair, and started with no players on board when I signed up with the club, and we've got the numbers up to 25, and I've got a good group. I've got an honest group, and do you know what? They were all pretty honest with the performances on where they was as well from weekend. So that's good going forwards in itself, that they all realised probably where they was, and there's no one who will think, whoa, he's rated himself a bit higher than what I had him at, or he's rated himself massively lower than. Probably, if anything, a couple did rate themselves a bit lower who I thought probably performed on the night. But again, we're work in progress. We've got to do a lot of work. We realise that, and hopefully when the season comes round, League One season at the end of March, we're ready to go.
It's a long way away now. 52 days. I'm just on the website here. 52 days until your next game. Even if you'd won in this round and maybe the next round, you still would have had a long time to wait until that League One season gets underway.
Yeah, that's why we already penciled in. We spoke with Rochdale about that game anyway, because we needed something in between, like you just said. Even if we probably get to where we're meant to get in a cup, you don't know over cup where you're going to go out, where you don't. When the Championship teams comes in, you know, there's some full-time boys at the top and some strong teams, and or your potential of causing an upset like Loch Lane did with some of the other teams, you know, and that's cup rugby. I do love club rugby. I think it's great that people can play different teams as identified at the weekend. There's nothing better than watching another sport and watching soccer. You know, when Tottenham play Marine and stuff like that. And the beauty of the cup is that they get an opportunity there to play against some players and challenge yourselves and see exactly where you are as a player and as a coach, and see where you are against them guys. For a club like ours, it's obviously trying to get through in the cup and try to test yourself against the Super League team. And do you know what? only a couple of years ago, Oldham turned over Hull KR. I was involved in, obviously, coaching at Swinton when we turned over Huddersfield. You know, it happens. We're not the first team it's happened to. I don't think we'll be the last, obviously, but it is on our record. It's not a record we're proud of. But it's there now. We've got to move on. It's time to move on, and fully intend to move the club on.
Now, hopefully that's been a cathartic few minutes for you. Certainly, highly commendable that clearly you're not looking to make any form of excuse. But just picking up a bit on Richard's point about the gap, I mean, clearly you're preparing for a season that starts at the end of March, and Loch Lane are in competition at the moment. How hard is it even to prepare a team at this time of year when really you're probably halfway through your pre-season?
Yeah, you bang on. As I spoke to some other coaches about it beforehand. I spoke to obviously our board, and I said it's this strangest pre-season I've ever planned, because you're trying to peak at two different times, and obviously we knew the cup was coming round and we wanted a cup run. I'm not going to lie about that, but like you said, and then you don't know when you're going to get knocked out that cup, and then you've got to try and raise the lads and condition yourself to go again, and once you get into the grind and week in, week out rugby, you're in there, and it becomes second nature. But when you're playing and then a couple of weeks without playing, and then another 3 weeks, 4 weeks without playing, it's sort of deconditions the boys a little bit. And there is no substitute for actual playing rugby. Like, you can run up mountains. We've challenged our boys this year. We've took them. Obviously, we've tried, like I said before, we recruited a brand new team, so we've had to try think outside the box and take the lads out of their comfort zones, trying to build that togetherness. So we took them up Snowdon. It was very tough conditions and in the snow, and very challenging, to be honest, probably more challenging than what I thought as a coach. But it brought us together. We achieved something before Christmas, and then we've done the stuff with Charlie Bowling over at his Farmer Strong, and he's obviously a Commonwealth wrestler. He's just been pitching a Great Britain team, and he's got his own farm, and he does a bit of alternative training, a bit like in the old Rocky Balboa style, you know, on a farm, and lifting tyres and challenging the boys to take them apart and then piece them back together as a team. So we've done all that, and we have trained hard. We've been on the hills, we've done the wrestling, we've done the boxing, and like I said, we're confident we're ticking boxes, but there is no substitute for actual playing. Again, we played Wakefield the week before, a Wakefield reserve team, and we had obviously a couple of first-team boys in there, a couple of squad members. And we performed all right. We made a lot of changes, but we performed all right. We was happy with where we're at. But like you said, we do need to get the games in, to get the footage into the lads on exactly what I want to play. We run scenarios in training and detailed specifics, and we can get some footage to the boys, but nothing prepares you for, like Mike Tyson said, you can prepare as much as you want, but when someone smacks you in the face, it changes, you know. So not everyone defends how we defend, and not everyone plays the same way. So obviously that shows each week in, week out. Teams have got different strategies, teams have got different tactics. So we're preparing for that. Like I said, we tried to do our own work, tried to share everything with the boys. We try to be as professional as we can be. I want a professional environment. I want our boys learning. I want it to be a positive environment when they come, not smile on their faces. But
I think I'm here.
You're here. I'm here.
Yeah, I was going to follow that up. That clearly that's a very extensive explanation of where you are. But looking at social media, we've spoken to a couple of the lads that do a podcast for you. I know Chris Hamilton has made a statement saying, you know, apologises for that performance, but it's not going to knock you off course. There actually seems to be a bit of a feel-good factor around the club at the moment. Is that fair?
Yeah, obviously, Chris works very hard. He's hands-on, and he's been very supportive since I got the job. And obviously, John Roddy on board as vice chairman is someone I've worked with before at both Swinton and at Leigh. When I was obviously playing at Leigh, John was the chairman there at the time. Both great people, and we've got a togetherness at the club where we're trying to piece everything together. And in the recruitment, we tried to recruit some Oldham boys to that team to give us ownership around the town and filter us back into the amateur clubs to obviously We've got a lad who come through at Saddleworth. We've got a lad who's come through at Waterhead, and you know, it pieces that jigsaw back together. Oldham is a stronghold for amateur rugby league. We've got a lot of teams there, and more than I've had access to in my jobs previously, and whether that be playing or coaching. So it is a hotbed of rugby if we can nurture that and grow it. But the only way we're going to do that is by everyone pulling together. I think before there's been relationships fractured and stuff, and it's our job as owners of our jobs at the moment is to pull everything back together and get everyone singing from the same hymn sheet. We have an actual saying with Ireland, there's no strength without unity, so it's Kayla, and that's obviously our motto, and fully believe in that. And we're not a big enough club where we can have different, like a supporter section that doesn't get on with the board, or the board don't get on with this section, or me not getting on with certain clubs. We're not a big enough organisation. We're not that organisation. So we need everyone to pull together. We need everybody to obviously, first of all, I'm a sports fan. I love rugby league, quite obviously, but I love sport, and I try and watch as much sport as I can. Obviously, it gets a bit difficult in season time when I've got a full-time job and I'm clipping videos and stuff. My priority is rugby, but obviously I do love sport. So it's getting that out there. It's getting a professional sports club in the town. Obviously ourselves and Oldham Athletic, who are probably struggling a little bit at the moment, which is trying to get that back on the map between both of us and give something for the children in Oldham to aspire to. And I'm a big believer in, you want kids to dream big. I work in a school, I work on the educational side, and I don't think anyone should be there to grow weeds around anyone's dreams, you know, and we should nurture them and let people follow their dreams. So if we can be part of them aspirations and part of them dreams as a club and get the club to where we want it and where we feel it should be, then obviously we've played our part within that.
You mentioned Oldham Athletic, and obviously they're having their issues at the moment. I'm not saying that people are going to switch from watching Oldham Athletic to Oldham Rugby just because there's trouble at Oldham Athletic, but it does show that there's a place perhaps for both in the town to grow and build supporter bases together, because obviously you both want to be successful in the future.
Oh yeah, definitely. Obviously I had the struggles at the moment, but I'm sure they're determined to turn that around, and I'm sure they're working very hard to do that. We're supportive of the club because they're in the same town as us, and obviously, like I just said before, we want everyone to be a success in the town. The more successful Oldham Athletic are, and the more successful Oldham Rugby Club is, the more successful Oldham Town is, really, because it brings visitors to the town week in, week out, whether that be through the summer with the rugby or through the winter season with the football. It's massively improved Boundary Park since I last played there. Obviously, I think the last time I played was for Salford a good few years ago. But I was amazed when I saw the stadium actually, and the new stand there. It's pretty impressive, and obviously, if there's any aspirations one day maybe playing there and partnering up, then obviously we'd be fully supportive of that, or I would be anyway. But I don't make the calls on that. But no, we wish them all the best, and like I said, we just want success for everybody within the town, really. And like I said, from a sporting point of view, he's raising aspirations within people in the town, but children having heroes within that. Children are the future, whichever way you look at everything, whether that be future players for ourselves at Oldham Roughyeds, future sponsors, future physios, future board members. We've got to engage the kids, which I fully respect what the board's done this year and giving the tickets out for the under-16s. And like as I said, if you're going to grow anything, we need the kids engaged in it. They're the future. That's where your club's heading, and we need them on board.
You certainly brought in a marquee player, if you will, for League One. Not a marquee player in terms of how much you're paying him, but in Martin Ridyard. Well, I don't know what he's getting paid. Martin Ridyard, obviously a name which he's going to catch the headlines, and obviously he's going to be crucial for Oldham going forward this year.
No, definitely. We're definitely not got Super League marquee money though. No, Martin's great. He's someone I've played with well, first of all, someone from the same amateur club as myself over at Lee Miners Rangers, and obviously we come through the same systems there. We then played together at Lee. Someone I brought over to Swinton last year, and Martin Fowler's over to Oldham. I know exactly what Martin's about. I know exactly what he'll bring. He still trains as if he's a 23-year-old Martin Ridyard. You know, he pushes himself. He's a winner. He doesn't like losing. You could tell at the weekend he started trying to put himself about a little bit, which is probably not his game, but because he was frustrated, you know, and you can tell that, and he brings that winning ethos. Obviously challenges myself to be better. He helps me with certain structures and stuff, and obviously gives me another set of eyes around that. He's probably my voice on the field as well, being captain of the club. He works closely with myself and Brendan around the structures. But I have got a good leadership group, to be fair, all of them who I trust. But yeah, Martin, he's been brought in to guide us around that park, and I'm fully confident he can do that job. Obviously, as people get older, people might question his age, but I don't think his age is affecting him currently. He's still pushing himself within the fitness drills. There's certain things what I told him he might not have to do, but he still did. You know, and that's because he's a winner. So I'm very happy with Martin's performance in training with us so far, but not just that like guidance on the pitch. He's guiding players off the pitch. He's bringing them on. He's telling them what we need. He's another voice from that. He's very supportive of the other players. He wants everybody to improve. He's not selfish. He puts the team first before himself. Some players, you know, you might see someone who's wanting to take your spot, and maybe give him a bit of information, but hold a bit back. And he's not one of them. He fully shares everything he's developed within himself. He's willing to share, so the other players need to be a sponge around him, really.
You mentioned experience, and Oldham's an astonishing town for the number of players that have gone on to be top-class professional players. Some of whom still hold a great affinity and love for the club and the town. Would you consider getting either them in as ambassadors to sell the club, to do specialist coaching sessions, just to be there on the terraces for the young kids that you've got coming through, to act as role models?
Oh, definitely. There's a social media platforms have gone out today with, I know John and Chris sat down yesterday and the board sat down bringing with all the partners. So there's several partners coming at the table, sitting together. And one of them is the Past Players Association, and obviously making that stronger. Fully back any Past Players Association. Obviously involved in a couple myself. And like you said, when you finish playing rugby, and obviously I've been there as well, and everything kind of stops, and the days you can get with going back, seeing some friends that you've not seen before, and the lads cherish that, and we've got to nurture that, because we want to make it a special place to represent Oldham, and these guys have represented Oldham before us, and at a club you're only ever in charge of that jersey for a set period of time, whether that be 6 months, 1 year, 10 years, and it's your job to try and pick that jersey up and leave it in a better spot than what you picked it up in. The guys before us have all done that. The coaches before me have all done that. Hopefully I can put my spin on things here and leave things in a healthier position whenever that may be. Leave it in a healthier position than what you picked it up in. Fully back the past players, and if we can obviously get more of them at the table, like you've identified, more speaking to the boys about the heritage of Oldham, what obviously some of the game stuff, what they've been through, the experience that they've had within the club, and it gives ownership. Obviously, I've seen a thing with Jesse Senelafeo saying at Featherstone and how much he'd looked up to the heritage of the team and that, and it gives you ownership, doesn't it? And you know who's actually played for that club, who's been there, done it, where they've been, what they've won. And you know, and that can only filter down. We've got, probably apart from Martin, who we spoke about before, we've got a younger side, us, to be fair. So got a few boys in there who need nurturing, who need bringing on, who need developing, and getting experience from the past players. It's another voice, but yeah, it's definitely an avenue I'm willing to go down.
and somebody can tell them how cold it used to be playing at the Watershed, because they'll never believe it.
Oh, I can believe you. I keep saying to Chris Hamilton, "Are you sure it's not a ski resort, Oldham?"
We've been speculating about how League One might go this year. We've talked to the Hurricanes, we've talked to Swinton. We're hopefully doing something with Hunslet in a couple of weeks' time. How do you see it? I mean, clearly you'll be one of the favourites, having come down to go up. What do you think League One's going to look like this year, and how important is it to mount a promotion push over the next 2 years to sit yourselves in the Championship, where obviously clearly you're a club that's geared up for?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very open. I think there's a few teams who can knock each other off on the day, and it's going to be who turns up and who gets them consistent actions. Obviously, there's a couple of squads who have been identified by others as being the strongest squads in the league. But yeah, we're quietly we're working in progress, and I'm happy where we're at, and feel each day we keep working harder, and we keep closing that gap on certain teams. I do think it is wide open, really, with the promotion. I wouldn't say there's anyone really. Obviously, Swinton had a massive win at weekend against West Wales, and they've been in a bit of form to start the season, haven't they? Keighley have been spoken about as favourites, but Hunt's had a great win there at weekend, and since Alan Kilshaw went in, they've sort of hit some form at the back end of last year. North Wales had an outstanding year last year. Doncaster coached very well. There's a lot of teams up there, and they'll be punching around. And if you're not on your mettle, obviously I know the work that Andy Mays has done. I'm still close friends with Andy, and I'm good friends with Matt Calland, and I know that there are local rivals, and LSU want to beat them when we play them. But no, everybody's working hard, and they're doing great stuff with the money what they've got. What people probably not, obviously the rugby people do know, but there's been massive funding cuts this year, within the league and stuff, and clubs have had to balance that and find new ways to go about growing your club and growing your organisation, and growing, like you just said before, growing off the pitch as well as on it, and becoming self-sustainable, and that's got to be done organically, and both in recruitment of players and pathways and how you go about that, but also what product you're putting on the pitch. That's where obviously I'm worried about. That's why I was disappointed with the other day with how we've turned up. But no, we've got to grow it. I do feel it's the league's wide open. I do feel that quite obviously the most consistent team will win the league. There's a couple of spots open there, and then if you get into the rugby playoffs, it's on the day into the sort of two competitions within one. Everybody's aiming for the top spot straight off. But then if you don't get that, then you're aiming for a playoff play. It's aiming to finish as high in the playoffs as you can, so you get an home path into the final if you can get there. But yeah, I think it will be a testing league. I think it'll be a very exciting league looking at it. I think there's a balance between the three leagues at the moment. I think the Championship will be really exciting as well, and obviously the Super League's not started yet, but I think we've got a good product between the three leagues. I think we've got an exciting product. Hopefully we get some good footage out there what people can watch and get engaged with to become fans themselves. I see there's a lot of clubs doing good stuff off the pitch and growing the game, and we've got to nurture that. And like I said, even though obviously I want Oldham to be a success, I want Rugby League to be a success. So I think we have got to grow in areas what we're not in currently. I'm pro expansion. I'm all supportive for that. I think the Hurricanes are doing a great job with promoting the game. Obviously Cornwall just got engaged. For me, we need a strong London side. Or two strong London sides, even better. And we need to grow that, but also we've got to be strong in the heartlands where it's probably our bread and butter, and people who fully are supportive to the teams, whether them be from town, cities, wherever they're from. It's the lifeblood of them areas, and yeah, I do think it's going to be a good year.
Before we move on to the World Cup, I've got to ask, and my geography knowledge is useless, that side of the Pennines. I know where Manchester is and Liverpool's further on the coast. But Oldham, you're playing back in Oldham. How important is it to be back in the town this year for your side?
Massive, mate. I feel massive. Obviously, I've not been at the club long, but I do think it is big to play in your own town, to have that ownership, and to get people on board. Sometimes it's harder to sort of say we're Oldham, but we're playing somewhere in another town, and you've got to travel here to play us. And getting that ownership of your own ground, it's hard if you're not there all the time, and you're trying to grow outside of the borough, and people have got to get buses to games, or maybe obviously different transport avenues. But it becomes harder, doesn't it? When people can turn up on the doorstep, makes it a bit easier. If there's on an hour in and they're kind of watching out for the games on, and that could be a swayer some days, because is it round the corner, or do we have to set off on a journey to get there? And it could be, oh no, well, such a body's on the TV instead, I'll watch that. Whereas if it's on your doorstep, I think it's there. You can get out and about around the surrounding areas. You can get into the local amateur clubs and try and engage them. Like I said, you've got different avenues to promote that support. I'm fully willing to back anything what the club want to try, and our support, our players are as well, engage with that. We've got to do our job as playing staff and performance staff to grow the club. And again, which spoke before, and see something great with Alex Ferguson, where someone said they got on the coach because they were tired, and Alex Ferguson made them all get back off and said, you go and sign autographs, and you'll sign them for an hour and a half, because they pay the wages at the end of the day. And as much as people might not like some things that get said, both at a rugby match and social media, it's bang on. They're the sponsors, they're the fans. They're putting money into the club. That's the lifeblood of that club is your fans. And lockdown probably identified that to us. As much as the game was great and sport did great to get things going behind closed doors, we all missed the fans, or I certainly did. I don't think the atmosphere was quite the same. And like I say all the time, there's just times in a game and your fans can give you a real lift and lift you within that game. And there's moments, I'm not saying they win the game for you, they never do that. It's down to the players on that. But there is certain things in the game where momentum can probably swing a little bit with the fans' engagement, and no, fully supportive of that. I hope it long continues. I hope we're now heading out, I think like everybody does, I hope we're heading out of the COVID side and we're getting back to some kind of normality.
I know you've got, an important season for Oldham to think about first, but the World Cup is coming. We're excited about it. We're excited about the atmosphere for Ireland versus Jamaica. And of course, now, because of lockdown, because no one's played for years, you've got the world's #1 ranked team in your group in New Zealand. It's a great opportunity for Irish Rugby League.
No, massive. Massive. It's a massive opportunity, again, to grow a sport. We're trying to grow a sport in Ireland. We are growing our footprint. There's loads of good stuff going on domestically. Obviously with the club side and the youth sides, the women's rugby now, it's growing, and there's more of a, not full collaboration, but more of not us against them with the union, but more accepting each other and how we grow together and maybe use each other with that. What we have always had is players with the transferable skills, whether that be from rugby union or from the Gaelic games. There is transferable skills there, but again, them boys just need rugby. They've not played as much rugby as the lads who's come through from under 7s, under 9s, under 11s over here and played all the way through. The lads haven't got that experience. And if you're coming from another background, like I tried to piece it together, that if I played rugby union, I don't know the ins and outs and the specifics of everything, but when I come under the pump, I think I'd go back to my rugby league habits. And I think that happens sometimes with when we're playing some of the boys within the games and stuff, and when you're looking into the finer details of what we're looking for. But no, massive year ahead for us. You just touched on the game with Jamaica, so obviously Jordan Andrade plays for us at Oldham, and he's hoping to get in the Jamaica squad for that one. So I said I'm love him all year, apart from probably that day. But no, we're looking forward to it. Jamaica's done some great work at promoting themselves and promoting the game in Leeds. We're intending to do our own promotion around that and supporting with that. We've got a group what I think we can be successful in. But I'd imagine a lot of the teams in there, New Zealand are a standout team. Like everybody knows, you just said they're identified as #1 in the world at the moment, so you don't get that tag lightly. So there's no illusions of how tough that challenge will be, but it's one what I think we can grow into if we put our best foot forward in the games against Jamaica and Lebanon leading up to that New Zealand game. So yeah, there's plans in process with Ireland. We obviously planned for the last World Cup. Well, the World Cup never was kind of thing. It's still the 2021 World Cup into this year. So yeah, we're really looking forward to it. We've got some things planned throughout the year, touching base with the boys. We think we can get a good squad on the paddock, hoping everyone stays fit through the year. And obviously now the form over the season will determine the places within that. Myself personally, playing in 2 World Cups was probably the biggest things in my career when you look back, and yeah, I've won some trophies and stuff, but they're massive. You're away from your family, you're with the boys, there's a real togetherness and a unity within that, and striving to achieve something. And when you look back, like I said, both are totally different probably experiences. On obviously in 2008 we got to quarterfinals and probably were underestimated by a few teams and come through that. In the 2013 one that I played in, we was in probably group of death with the other 3 teams in the group, ended up being in the semi-finals. So it was probably that game with Fiji in the first game that probably determined who was going through with that one. But the crowds, again, massive. It's massive for the players. It's the best players in the world will all be there on show, and we're delighted to play our part within that. And again, anything we can do to grow crowds or support that event, if anyone's listening and just thinking, should I get a ticket, should I not, get involved. It's going to be massive for the rugby league community. It's a real chance for us to put a big footstep within sporting community in the country and in obviously the Northern Hemisphere. You know, it's our opportunity, and I think again, like we just said with Oldham, we've got to get everyone who has any affinity to rugby league to pull together to make that the most successful tournament it's ever been.
Time is going to run out on this. I tell you, the people on Radio Manchester must love you, Stuart, because you ask a question, you're on for about 5 or 6 minutes answering it. It's brilliant. Phil, have you got a short question? A question that Stuart can answer in about 2 minutes.
Well, the question will be short. It's the answer. I think just going back to Ireland, you say if anybody's thinking of buying a ticket, this is the group they should buy it for, because you've got the Irish who know how to sing and have a party, the Jamaicans, the Lebanese, and the New Zealanders. If that isn't the group of atmosphere, I don't know what is. Just very quickly, I know I've spoken to people like Louis McCarthy Scarsbrook and Kyle Amor a lot about still wanting to represent Ireland. They had a fantastic time when they did. Are they the kind of players that you would hope will still be involved once the World Cup comes around?
Yeah, obviously we've got a wide pool of players going from Championship, League One, Championship, domestically. We've got Super League players and NRL players who obviously qualify through different reasons. Obviously, like I said, some are born in Ireland, some are heritage. But yeah, we're all put that green jersey on, and we're all proud to represent Ireland. You bang on. Everybody who ever represents Ireland, and it will tell you the togetherness in that squad and that unity. It's unreal, and it is the best times of your life. And I fully intend the World Cup to be the next part of that chapter, you know, for that our team.
I don't think I've ever experienced. I don't think I've ever experienced an atmosphere like the England-Ireland game at Headingley in 2000. So if it's anything like that for the 2 games at Headingley and the one, of course, at Leigh, which you must be inviting all your family and friends and everyone from Leigh to support you. It's going to be great. Stuart, thank you very much for your time. Much appreciated. Enjoy the next 50 odd days before you get to get your side out there on the pitch again. And yeah, good luck for the rest of the season at Oldham, and fingers crossed all the positivity that's going on off the field transfers on the field as well.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you. Pleased to speak to you. Okay.
Neil, what's going on? What is the Rugby League Record Keepers Club? What is it? Why is it important? What are you doing?
So Rugby League Record Keepers Club was originally started about 50 years ago. So in the 1970s, a guy called Irving Saxton basically started a huge piece of work and did that in conjunction with the Rugby Football League to categorise games and come up with an official record of the sport. So up until that point, nothing had been done. No real detailed records had necessarily been kept by clubs or by individuals, certainly not in any coordinated way, and nothing by the authorities either. And there were disputes over certain records at the time, and who scored most points, there wasn't much dispute about who scored the most tries by that point at least, but there was lack of clarity on how many tries people like Brian Bevan had actually scored, and no consensus on numbers because different people counted things in different ways. So what Irving and a group of historians and statisticians did was basically categorise all of those games and agree what counted as official matches and what were friendly games and therefore outside the records. So that became the canon of the game, I suppose, from a record-keeping point of view, and not just the categorisation of that, but then found, through newspaper reports, searching in libraries, that sort of thing, the full details of pretty much all of those games, very, very close to all of those games, and created that comprehensive record. So that work took the best part of 20 odd years, I think, and by the mid-90s, they'd got everything up to date, so they had that complete record. And there were existing publications kicking around at the time that meant that was being updated on an annual basis. So the original Record Keepers Club wound up then. And then, nothing more was kind of heard of it for the best part of 20 years. And people still had copies of the old information that had been published. But that was all in paper form, just in hard copies that was kicking around. And that wasn't really widely accessible and certainly not freely available online and or anything like that. So there was quite a bit of chat on social media as these things kind of snowball, I suppose, and suggestions about reforming the Record Keepers Club, which is what a few of us got together at the back end of 2019 and thought, there's a germ of an idea here. Maybe we should start to think about restarting things and possibly bring this into the 21st century, which is where I kind of came in, really.
Everyone loves databases and spreadsheets. I used to work with them when I had a proper job in the past. How much work has had to go into digitizing, I guess, all this information from the history of the sport?
A huge amount, and it's been spread amongst a large group of people, really. We were fortunate, I think, from a timing point of view, and fortunate with circumstances, if it's right to kind of use that phrase, I suppose, given all what's been going on, to almost seem to take advantage of it, but by luck rather than anything else, obviously. We from some initial meetings and discussions at the back end of 2019, I kind of took the lead on trying to contact different historians and club statisticians and see if there was much appetite out there to, get a coordinated approach going to get things started again and share stuff online and get things digitized, like you say. And there was definitely a real uptake and people thinking it was a great idea. And what was probably lacking was somebody putting themselves forward to coordinate that. And I guess I blinked first. So I ended up almost by default having made a lot of contact with people and starting to coordinate those activities and try to give some structure to the gathering of the data in an electronic format. And we decided to open that up to anybody who was wanting to be involved. And relaunch the club officially and, let people sign up as members. And we decided to do this, obviously, a few weeks to months earlier. But we actually launched on the 1st of April 2020. which just happened to be about a week after everyone was told that they weren't allowed to step out their houses and had to find themselves something else to do. Fortunately, that meant that we all of a sudden had quite a lot of rugby folk who couldn't get to games, couldn't do a lot else, and wanted to help pass the time and keep themselves interested. And all of a sudden there's an interesting project here that needs someone to spend a lot of time sat in front of a computer typing in information from paper sheets. We suddenly found that we had quite a lot of willing volunteers that maybe if the season had been going on and people have had other distractions, wouldn't have been the case. So we were quite fortunate, probably from that point of view, to suddenly have willing, able people who all mucked in. And essentially by the end of 2020, we'd got all of those handwritten sheets typed up, covering some 55,000 games, I think, from the first 100 years of the sport. So that's a lot of player entries and tries scored, and a huge amount of data to input, but spread across a good few dozen people with a fair bit of time on their hands. It was quite doable over that 9 months or so.
I mean, obviously today everything should be as accurate as possible because the games are broadcast. There's a load of media there. I mean, unfortunately, for example, in the Women's Super League last year, there was a game between Wakefield and Huddersfield. I was the only media person there, and I did take my eye off the game at one point and miss whether a conversion went over or not. So I'm not sure what the final score was. So the only person who will know will be the referee on that occasion. But I guess you can only go on what's the records of the time have been from all the games, 100 odd years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so you tend to find that it's certain times of year where there's problems. Christmas and Easter, if there's any blanks ever in club records, it's usually around about that time, because specifically over Easter, that if papers were being published on the Saturday, you'd have had the game played on the Friday, then you've got the game that day, then you've got a game the following day, and maybe another midweek one before the next week's publication's out. So the chances of those 3 or 4 games getting a full write-up and teams listed and all the scorers mentioned is a bit remote in some instances. So that tends to be where you get blanks. Players' names, first names of players, people have spent huge amounts of time piecing bits of jigsaws together, trying to fill those in. But there's still, my club's Warrington. We've done quite a lot of work there. We've got over 100 players, I think, which is probably about 7 or 8% of the players that have ever played a first team match who we've still not got a first name for, because it's hard to get, basically, because the records don't exist from the time. So it is a very time consuming exercise, almost club by club, to piece things together. And that's probably underpinned our approach, I think, from the record keepers this time round. And one of my main activities really is trying to find out who's the people that's invested that time and done that research and got access to that information, because that's who we want on board, and that's who we want to be kind of sharing that for the greater good of the game. But yeah, it's challenging at times to fill all of those blanks in, for sure.
I mean, something that must be challenging, and I was thinking about this earlier, because I had a look on the website, I had a look at a few of the things that are there, and obviously it's not all up there at the moment, but the likes of Chorley Borough, because there are 2 Chorley boroughs, and they split off, and one's from the Heighton family and one's goes off to become Trafford Borough. And I mean, how do you reconcile all these different clubs that were the same lineage? Do you have them all as separate clubs? Because as much as I can joke that Bradford Bulls 2014 is not the same as Bradford Bulls 1996, for all intents and purposes, of course they are, but these were clubs who became different entities.
Yeah, and we've gone back and ruled on all of that stuff effectively. So there's some long accepted practice in some of that. So the old, I suppose one of the first, and when you think about it with hindsight, one of the craziest kind of moves of Wigan Highfield relocating down to London and becoming London Highfield, and having a couple of seasons, one season down there, I think it was, before they then returned and became Liverpool City. We talk about some of the things going on today with clubs moving around, but that was something going on in the 1930s, and players getting a train down from up north to play down in London on a Wednesday night under floodlights. It is just a crazy situation, but that's long been accepted. That was the same club. You know, a lot of those players actually from Wigan Highfield did play for London Highfield the following season. So we judge each of those things on its own merits, and there's different criteria as to what you can look at to kind of rule is a club a continuation of the one that went before. So a player's retained, is the name retained, or elements of the name retained? Are the club colours retained? Is it the same ownership and just a different town or ground that they're playing out of? And there's a spectrum along which, you know, some of those things are really obviously just one team moving to a stadium on the other side of town, and all other things staying the same. Then you get things that get a little bit more tenuous as you go over time, and there's a tipping point, but it's a judgmental tipping point. And we've gone back and on all of those contentious points kind of given our view, which might be acceptable to some people. People might have different views on some of that, so we're not saying it's the definitive, but we're saying that for our purposes, for what we're going to do from a record keeping point of view, this is the approach that we're going to take, and we'll share as much information as we can as to why we've concluded that, and then people can, I guess, make their own decisions as to whether they agree or not.
Whereas I would be in the camp of when we got to Wembley last year in the 1895 Cup final, the York who was there was not the York who were there 90 years ago, whatever. Someone, it's tricky, isn't it? Because as you say, everyone's got an opinion on what is a continuation of the same club. Yeah,
and York's an interesting one. I mean, you've got, there's a number of indicators there that suggest that you might know the year better than me, 2013, was it 2012? Did they
something like that?
Through? Yeah. You know, they stop partway through a season. That's unhelpful because then they have a period where they're not playing. That's one of the things when you've got a break in play that counts against you, I suppose. You know, and when they reformed, there was a lot of stuff that was new. I think the critical thing for the York situation, similar to the whole Sheffield conundrum around the 2000 time and their merger, is fan base was one of the key things that kind of retained. And although sometimes owners maybe want to distance themselves from the previous regime, there is a definite continuity of fans in a lot of those instances, and you know, certain kind of key people behind the scenes maintaining involvement. And I think that's quite important when you boil it down to the essence of what actually is a club. Clearly the fans and the people who have got that emotional attachment to you know, to the team bearing their town name typically, then that's one of the key kind of attributes. So in instances where that's broken, it starts to maybe lead you down a different path in terms of you know, it being a new entity. But in a lot of instances, I think we would conclude that there is continuity when you know, certain factors are still changing.
Yeah, much like in football, where I think the team who won the FA Cup in 1988, who currently play in Milton Keynes, do not claim to have won the FA Cup in 1988, despite the fact they are obviously the continuation of that club. That's where it gets messy, where it's emotion is brought into things. And it must be difficult to tear apart emotion from stats, which are just numbers on a page. They can't be, well, they can be disputed, but they shouldn't be disputed in a sense.
Yeah, and I think one of the points I've made a few times, I think, is the thing with the stats is they're not the history of the game, but it's impossible to tell the history of the game without them. So, you know, you can't talk about Brian Bevan without mentioning numbers. And I'm a Warrington fan, so I'll mention Bevan whenever we start talking about stats. But it's impossible to kind of talk about his career without at some point mentioning 796 tries, because, and the fact that it's a locked on number of 796 tries is quite helpful, I think, because at least then there is an agreement of what he achieved in that sense. And that brings an introduction almost to then the flavour that, you know, you need to kind of add to really tell a story, and then people can start talking about individual tries that he scored, and that's where the really interesting stuff maybe comes through. So yeah, the stats aren't the history, but it's impossible to ignore them when you're talking about what's been before, I think.
And those records like Brian Bevan's, Neil Fox's, etc. They are never going to be broken, and never going to even be close to being broken. We saw with Kevin Sinfield in his career; he got nowhere near Neil Fox's numbers. I know Fox played a lot longer than Sinfield, but they obviously played a lot more games in the past than they do today.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think that you're actually seeing in quite a lot of sports now that some of those all-time records are getting close to being broken, or have been broken. And be that, you know, and you're talking a wide variety of sports, so everything from soccer through to tennis, you know, Grand Slam titles have gone and are all modern players who are right up there in terms of who's won the most. And that's really because, you know, the advances in medical science and the attention to the recovery and the fitness levels that the guys at the top of their sport have got is such that whilst it's not typical to have careers of 20 years, you're now seeing careers of that length. And from players, you know, from the Ronaldos, from the Bradys, from the Nadals and Djokovic's of the world, they're having careers which last for significantly longer periods of time than the average, and at the top of their career for that long. The bit with rugby, with it being an attritional type of sport, is there's a limit to what you can do there, and we're never going to go back to playing 40, 45 games a season. Much as sometimes you think Super League might want to have enough loop games to fit that in, I don't think we're quite going to get back there. So, you know, 35 is probably the upper limit that you can have. So unless someone comes along who's going to score at a significantly higher rate per game, then yeah, those records are never even going to get close to being broken. But I don't know, could I see someone scoring 5,000 points in a career? Yeah, I think that's possible. But Neil Fox is on 6,200 odd, so he's still got a pretty sizable buffer, you think, there. And Bevan probably even more so. I think if a Fire, who had quite a long career playing only for the champion team pretty much for the duration of that, and can't get within 250, then there's not much hope for anybody else, I don't think.
And Neil Fox, of course, scored his tries when there were 3 points, rather not that most of his points were tries, but still, you had those, add some extra points on there, make it even bigger. Of course, one of the great things, of course, in our sport is the fact that the Australians think none of our records count, and theirs are all the records that start over there. But that's the Australians for you. You mentioned what does count and what doesn't count as a match, and one of my bugbears, and I know you've picked up on this because I know you've tweeted about this recently, is all these people who are currently making debuts and scoring their first tries for club and are not making their debuts or scoring their first tries for clubs, because if they did, then Johnny Vegas would have a heritage number for St Helens, and as far as I'm aware, he doesn't, because he played in a friendly. Yeah.
I think I remember being at Gary Chambers and Chris Rudd had a dual testimonial, and the game that they played, I think for about 5 minutes they played with an inflatable sheet rather than a ball. So I think for good reason some of those games are not included in official records. The boundary's definitely been drawn in the right place, I think, for those. There's what you term it if it's not a debut, I guess, is the discussion point. First appearance or making their bow or something like that. All of that's acceptable. Debut should be a protected term. Maybe we need to somehow get it trademarked or whatever you would have to do.
It's put in the Rugby League Media Guide, you can't call them debuts unless they're actually in proper official matches. As an aside, the 1955 ITA Television Trophy, or Associated Reading, whatever it's called, Warrington won it. Are they official matches? Because in the Wakefield programme the week before, and I can't remember who they played the week before, but it does mention that they're friendlies or challenge matches or something. Are they official matches or not?
Yes, they are. So the rule of thumb, or the diktat, I suppose, that was kind of agreed, is that if the RFL were involved in the selection of the teams to take part or somehow in organising the tournament, then that's an official competition. So that's where you've got a distinction to Warrington played a friendly in Dublin against Wigan in the 1930s. And that was just a promoter reaching out, wanting a couple of high-profile teams to go over there and play a match, agreed with secretaries. The RFL then sanctioned the match, I believe, and signed off on the fact that as member clubs, I think they had to seek permission to be able to go and play in that game. But that was a private venture, if you like, and a private enterprise. So it wasn't a case that the promoter came to the RFL and said, I want the Challenge Cup winners and the league winners to come over and play. He just happened to, decide on those two particular clubs, or they showed willing. And that was how that was arranged. So that's therefore not an official match. And there was another cup, I think that was in Dublin as well, that was played over in Ireland, where the team, I think that was a 4-team competition. And that was done in the opposite way, where it was arranged through the RFL. They had a hand in selecting the teams. I think it was originally going to be something like the top 4 teams, but then I think Britain were touring or something, and 2 of the clubs ended up decimated. So they actually ended up subbing a couple of others in who finished 5th and 6th. So it looks a bit messy from the outside, but the RFL had their hands all over that and were involved in setting the tournament up. Therefore, that one counts as an example. So there is definitely stuff in the margins that when you first look at it, doesn't look immediately obvious as to why it's in. But yeah, rest assured, there's been quite a lot of rigor and rationale ruled on all of those sorts of things. Hopefully we've got them all right.
I'm going to have to go back through the programmes for the final of the Blackpool Holiday Trophy or whatever it was in 1954 when Wakefield played Barrow, I think it was, which I don't know if that was sanctioned by the RFL or not. I'll have to check. Of course, the big controversial point on our programme, and has been for at least 3 years, is Mr. Schofield's 50th cap. He may not be with us, but he's always with us in spirit. And of course, he played for Great Britain against the rest of the world in 1988, but that one doesn't count as an international, does it?
It doesn't, no. And so that black and white, that's beyond dispute and been ruled on. But yeah, joking aside on this, I was part of representing the Record Keepers Club. Have just been part of a big piece of work that International Rugby League have led, a long overdue piece of work, I think, to essentially do what the RFL and Irving and co did 40, 50 years ago for the domestic game. IRL have initiated and done that piece of work for the international game. They've done the men's so far. And that scope's been not expanded because it was always in scope to look at, to do the women's and the wheelchair as well, and to give basically a comprehensive list of these are, again, it's a view and it's a judgment, if you like, on some of those things, but this is what, from their perspective, they define as the definitive list of international matches. Unfortunately, the rest of the World Games don't get on there simply because they're not selected by the national governing body of a member organisation. They are what they are. They're selective teams of world-class players, no doubt, but not representative of an international member. So by definition, they can't be an international match, unfortunately.
So the game. Is it one of Mick Sullivan's caps was against other nations or something? That one does count.
Yes. So now you're really into the grey. You're really into the grey here. So I mean, other nationalities.
This is what the people listening want. This is what they want.
Good. Well, let's give them what they want. Other nationalities is a fascinating one. So you've got to look back at the origin of where other nationalities came from. So their first game was way back in 1904. They actually played in what is accepted, I think, as being the first international match of rugby league. It was still the Northern Union at the time and wasn't called rugby league then. But retrospectively, I suppose it is widely recognised as the first international match, and that was played against England. And that was at a time when, about 10 years post breakaway from rugby union. Rugby league, let's call it that for the sake of simplicity, didn't have any other nations effectively playing the game at that point. So whilst the county championship had been the kind of pinnacle from a representative point of view in Yorkshire, Lancashire, Cheshire, there was actually some pressure on that. Cheshire, some of the teams there had been wound up, so that was a shrinking pool. The North East, for example, had teams around the first decade of the sport, and that wasn't the case anymore. So your ability to play the kind of North East counties wasn't there anymore. So it was almost a shrinking pool from that representative team's point of view. And the game wanted something of I suppose a headline highlight type of match, and wanted to be able to have an international presence. Quite difficult given its geographical spread at the time. You know, there were players who'd migrated up from Wales even by that point. So there were enough non-English players kicking around that they could raise a team to oppose England and give a competitive match. So that was the thinking behind, you know, we need England to have an opponent, other nationalities, therefore they can play the best of the rest effectively. That was the kind of origin of that team. And they played sporadically through the next few decades. As the game then did expand and Wales became more of a force, and obviously Australia and New Zealand jumped on board, so the game did have a genuine international presence. Then France in the 30s obviously started up as well. So through that time, other nationalities played the odd game, but then for various other political rugby league politics reasons, and a desire to kind of again have meaningful international tournaments that were a bit more expanded post-war, with a real high caliber of overseas Australians and New Zealanders playing in the British game. Other nationalities was somewhat resurrected at that point, and actually took part in the European Championship. So England, Wales, France and other nationalities were the competing teams there, and other nationalities won that tournament a couple of times in that period, and with some of the most famous names in the sport ever representing them. So you know, there's quite a long history and an interesting history there. We could talk even more about what they kind of move on to when they then later played in the county championship, which is an even more bizarre kind of twist to it. So, yeah, it's a really interesting history. Somebody needs to write something on that at some point, and we've got all the stats. If anybody needs and wants that, then again, you can't tell their story without those stats. But it would be good for somebody to flesh that out, I think.
Other nationalities as a county is as accurate as Lancashire and Yorkshire, which don't exist in the modern day, which of course they still brought back for the Origin games, which everyone's forgotten about and then wants to bring back on a regular basis. So the Exiles are not the other nationalities, and neither are the Combined Nations All-Stars, which of course I referenced in a tweet earlier today, but they contain English players who were spuriously in there for many and various reasons.
Yeah, I'd argue they're not. And again, it's to some degree, it's about applying some of those continuity criteria. It gets it even more murky when you're talking about representative teams, because that fan factor isn't really something you can bring into the mix. I don't know that you necessarily would have a natural affiliation maybe to some of those representative teams. So yeah, there's very different selection criteria for the teams over time. So Exiles had different criteria than other nationalities did. Combined Nations is different again. Yeah, I think on that selection criteria is one of the key things I think that differentiates those teams over time.
Basically what we're saying then is rugby league is chaos, and its history is even more chaotic, and you've all got to try and pull this all together into some kind of semblance of sense, I guess. Yeah,
and you need a fairly methodical approach to it, I think, to be able to cut through some of that. But yeah, it's once you start unpicking things, there's elements of logic that you can start to apply at least. But it isn't. I think what I see one of our roles as doing is making sure that we're as clear and as transparent on why we've concluded things so that kind of helps maybe educate or at least share with people new interesting things that maybe they didn't know before. So I think I'm always at pains to try to take the time to explain it, and hopefully people can see a logic to it and an understanding in what we've done. Whether they agree with it or not, again, it is subjective to some extent.
Yeah, I guess this will be the hardest question, but it sounds like the easiest one. What's the most interesting thing you've found in all the research so far in the 120 odd years of rugby league?
So that's a good question. I think the most interesting one for me is the story of England and I suppose the evolution of the top representative team from the RFL's point of view. So the really confusing period between the wars when there was two Englands, which were actually quite different things, which doesn't seem to make any sense when you look back at it through modern eyes. But you've got an England for the English, and then you've got an England which incorporates all of the British Isles, and that we would recognise as Great Britain now. And there's a lot of, I suppose, social history and geopolitical history that starts to kind of get interwoven into all of that, and a lot of implications on identity and all that sort of thing, and there's a lot of modern connotations for that, I guess, as well now. But that whole story of England and how the Northern Union evolved into England, into Great Britain, is probably another really interesting kind of evolutionary story, I think. And that's when you unpick that, and when you finally get your head around what's going on there, and we take some doing sometimes, I think. That's a really fascinating and interesting story, I think.
We can all learn from history. It is fascinating. For people who want to get involved, Neil, and people might not be wanting to get involved in sticking stuff in spreadsheets and stuff, what are you looking for members of this club? How can people get involved, and what do they need to do to be involved?
Yeah, so our website, rugbyleaguerecords.com, has got more information about the club. It's where you can sign up to be a member. So it costs £5 to join. At the moment, the stats that we've got loaded into our database are just visible for members. That's not because we're trying to cash in on it. It is our full intention to make that publicly available as soon as we're comfortable with sharing it and the accuracy, and being able to load new information in there week to week. So that's what we're going to start doing from this weekend's games. So each week we'll be updating the stats for all of the current games that are being played. So hopefully within a couple of months, we'll have that process nice and slick, and then everybody can freely see that. But if you want to pay a £5 to see that straight away and to support our work, then that's really helpful. That just gives us a few quid in the bank that helps fund other stuff that we want to do, and keeps us on a sound footing, and allows us to kind of continue to do our work. Even if you don't want to do that and can't spare a £5, jump on the website. Certainly now, but in a couple of months' time, there'll be lots of information on there. Share that with former players who might want to see their records on there. We'll be tweeting stuff out to do with current things that's going on, trying to give some interesting information there. Share that with fellow fans who might find it interesting if it's related to your club. Stick it on some of the social media forums that I know people will be on. And I think just use what we've got available and what we're putting out there to help to maybe sow the seeds for some of those really interesting stories that the sport's full of, really. So I think everybody can kind of get involved in that way, really, and share some of the stats love around the rugby league community.
Stories, debates and arguments, that's what it's going to start, and that's always good. Neil, thank you very much for your time this evening. Rugbyleaguerecords.com is the website address. So go there now, have a look, join up, and learn something about the history of the sport. Neil, thank you very much for your time.
No worries. Thanks for having me.